Good evening. Today is Wednesday, the 24th day of Iyar. Last night we counted 39 days of the Omer. And we're doing the recording later because we're traveling today. And today we begin chapter 51 in the Tanya. And this is, the Tanya has 53 chapters. We're getting into the last stretch of the Tanya. The whole book of Tanya is a very systematic, structured book, how the Alter Rebbe is guiding us, how we are able to serve Hashem. Alter Rebbe teaches us how we're able to overcome all of the challenges. And then he focuses and tells us what is the most important thing. And back in chapter 35, the Alter Rebbe spoke about the importance of doing the mitzvahs, the literal mitzvahs of action. As it says, Beficho belvavcha la'asosei, that is close to you, the thing Hashem says, to in your mouth and your heart to do it. And the bottom line is to do it. And the Alter Rebbe there brings a quote from the Zohar. It says from the Yenuka, a child that was saying amazing things. And in the quotes, it says that a Jew should not walk 4 cubits without covering the head. Why? Because the Shekhinah, the divine presence, dwells on the person's head. Now this Jew needs to know that this Shekhinah, the fire of the Shekhinah needs oil. Now, what is the oil? In order to keep the fire of the Shekhinah of Hashem's presence on the person. The oil, it says, is the mitzvahs, because the body of a Jew is like a wick, and the Shekhinah is the fire, and the fire needs oil. So he explained that the oil is mitzvahs. Why do we need mitzvahs for the oil? Why can't we just have the neshama itself of a Jew, the spiritual neshama that we have? Why is that not enough to keep the fire? And he explained back then that the neshama, even of a tzaddik, no matter how great you are, still there is something about the tzaddik, the person that wants to be connected, that there is the I want to be connected to Hashem. So it's not a complete nullification to God. Where oil, what is oil? When the oil is consumed in fire, every part of the oil is completely consumed. And the same thing, in order to keep the fire really connected, you need to have something that really is consumed completely to Hashem, nullified completely. And that is why he says that the soul itself is not enough. You have to have the mitzvah of Hashem, physical mitzvah. And that's what he calls, this is the oil. Now here in this chapter, in the next few chapters, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain more in details to understand, to appreciate this concept. First of all, he wants to explain why is oil considered the mitzvah. We know elsewhere that the oil represents the wisdom. And here he says the oil is connected with the physical, actual mitzvah. And it's important to understand that, because when you use an example, when you use something, a metaphor, it is in the Torah, the metaphor has to be exact, has to be perfect. Why? Because the Torah's metaphor is not just some arbitrary thing that you picked out of your mind. It is something that the metaphor is derived from its spiritual source. So if oil represents wisdom, that means there is something about wisdom that is related to oil. That is why, the story of Hanukkah, the Greeks, they defiled the oil. The Greeks represented the wisdom. They had a lot of wise things, and they wanted to defile the wisdom. So there's a lot of depth in understanding the connection between wisdom and oil. And now we need to understand what is the connection between actual mitzvahs and wisdom and oil. So that's we need to understand. This is one thing. And in order to understand this, we need also to understand that the Rebbe begins that we need to understand what does it mean that Hashem dwells in a certain place. Isn't God everywhere? God is everywhere. So how could you say, what does it mean that you say Hashem is in this place more in the other place? In the Holy Temple, there was in Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, God was there more than anywhere else. Or even it says other places, it says in the Mishnah, Kol Beyasar Shchinta Shari, when there's 10 people, when 10 people are together, the Shechina, the divine presence dwells among them. So what does it mean when we're saying that Hashem, the divine presence, is in one place more than in another place? And in today's lesson, the Alter Rebbe is going to say that in order to understand this, we need to first bring an analogy from a human soul and the human anatomy of the way our body works. So that's what we're going to explain here. The way the way everything in the body receives from its soul, from the soul. The energy, the forces, the life force that we receive from the neshama. And so let's get started, and it's a little complex. We're going to try to explain it, and just keep focused. So let's start. Here we go. Says the Alter Rebbe, for further explanation of the words of the Yenuka mentioned earlier in chapter 35, where the Yenuka was quoted as saying that the light of the Shekhinah which dwells upon a Jew needs oil, meaning good deeds. And now we ask the questions we said before. What the connection the good deeds have to oil? Which usually the oil is referred to Chachma, wisdom. Tzorich levayer, in order to understand this, is the Alter Rebbe, tzorich levayer tchila loving ktsas inyan ashras hashchina shoyis hashira bebeis kodshei kadoshim. It is necessary first to explain so that one may understand a little the concept of the Shechina, Hashem's dwelling, the God's presence dwelling in the dwelt, that it dwelt in the Holy of Holies, in the Holy Temple, the Holy of Holies. That was the highest place, the holiest place where the Shechina was. What does that mean? What does it mean that the Hashem is here more than else as somewhere else? Another thing, it says we need to understand, Kol Makim, Ashro as Hashchina, Ma Inyanai. Likewise, any other place where the Shechina dwells, what does this concept mean? What does it mean that the Shechina dwells in one place more than in another? Surely the whole world is full of His glory, and no place is void of Him. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain that what it means that in certain places that Hashem is more revealed. And he's going to bring the analogy from the human flesh, from human body, human soul. Says the Alter Rebbe, however, the key to understanding the subject is is to be found in the text that it says, "Kedechsiv umi bisari echeze eloika." In the text that says in Iyar, "And from my flesh I see God." The Alter Rebbe understands these words literally. From what we see within ourselves, in our own soul and body, we can visualize and parallel on the spiritual level in the divine emanation and the world in general. So he's going to explain. So he says, "Shekemoy shenishmas ha'adam mimemala kol ramach ivrei haguf beroishe v'ad ragla." By way of analogy, the human soul pervades all 248 organs of the body from head to foot. The body, the soul is everywhere, right? So what Alter Rebbe is going to explain is as follows. So the soul animates the body. How does the soul animate the body? It gives, there is, number one, there is the life in general. That a person is alive. He cannot be half alive. He cannot be half pregnant. You're either alive or not. And every part of the body is equally alive. The soul is in the brain, gives it life, just like it's in the toe. Everywhere is equally alive. But then there's the other part of the soul. The other part of what the soul gives the person. The life that each individual organ receives, its unique life force, what it needs to do the function that it needs. So the body, the human being is a very complex being. So we have eyes to see, and we have ability to smell, and we have ability to do actions. We can walk, we can hear, we can talk. Where does it come from? Obviously, everything comes from the soul, but in the soul itself, does the soul have eyes, or does the soul have the power of sight? Or is the soul defined in certain ways? The soul is way beyond it. The soul is more simple. It is beyond divisions. So, however, there is somehow that the energy comes down into the body from the soul, and it is divided into different types of life, different types of energies, different type of life force. So here the Alter Rebbe is going to say, there's two ways of looking at it. Obviously, there is the soul before it is defined by anything. The soul itself is spiritual. You cannot define it not by seeing and not by talking and not by smelling, nothing. The soul is really beyond. He's not using the word smelling, but that's besides the story. It's a separate issue. However, the question is that how does the eyes receive the power of sight? Is it something that the eyes gives, that from the soul it comes a simple energy, and the eye somehow transform that energy into power of sight? Or an example, the analogy would be like you're pouring water in a colored cup. So let's say you have a blue cup and you have a red cup, and you're pouring water. You're looking at the cup. What do you see? You see a red water and you see blue water. So the water is really plain. It's really simple, with a colorless, but the cup gives it the color. So perhaps we can say that this is the same way as the soul gives the simple energy, and the eyes form gives it its shape. The energy turns into energy of sight, and the same thing with the energy of speech and the energy of hearing. That's one way of seeing it. The other way of seeing it is that the soul itself, within the soul, there is a unique power that is already designed to be the power of sight within the soul itself. And the Alter Rebbe is going to say, on the one hand, that first of all, the Alter Rebbe here in the Tanya takes the latter approach, latter view, the second understanding, that this is not something that the eyes, that the organs really shape it, but within the soul itself there is a change. Not within the essence of the soul, but in the soul there is in potential a power to see. And basically what he's going to say, that the soul itself is really beyond divisions. The essence of the soul does not have any of those divisions. But when the soul comes to the body and brings its energy, gives its energy, it goes through the brain. And within the brain, there is the potential of the sight, of potential of hearing, potential of all of this. And how do we know this? Maybe the energy only forms later on when it reaches the organs. So Alter Rebbe says simple, because if that would be the case, if the definitions of the energy would be only after it reaches the organs, then the brain the brain would not be able to sense unique sensations of each organ. Let's say if the eyes is not able to see, there is a pain in the eyes, there's pain in the foot. The brain senses each one and knows where it's coming from. So obviously within the brain itself, there's already something there. So let's see inside. What is the Alter Rebbe trying to bring here? So he's trying to give us a more understanding of the human anatomy, if you will, so that we can understand it well. And once we understand this, we will be able to understand that similarly, there is the idea of the divine, the godly energy that animates the world. And just like in the brain, there is more soul, the more revelation of the soul than in the rest of the body. So too, it is with the divine soul, that there's certain places, there's certain times and certain people that there's more of a revelation of godliness. But now in today's lesson, he focuses more on the human body. So let's continue what we just explained. Let's see it inside. Says the Alter Rebbe, by way of analogy, the human soul pervades all 248 organs of the body from head to foot. And nevertheless, the principal abode in a revealed form and dwelling place in all-encompassing, not revealed form, is in one's brain. And from the brain, the soul is diffused throughout all the organs. Moreover, says each organ receives from the soul, a different form of life force and functional power appropriate to it according to its composition and character. So each organ receives its unique life force. The eye receives from the soul a life force, an ability to see. Ve'oizen lishmoya, and the ear receives from the life, from the soul, a life force and ability to hear. Ve'apel ledaber, the mouth to speak, ve'aglaim la'alech, and the feet to walk. And this is, as was clearly sensed, we can actually sense it. We sense that the brain, or in the brain, one is conscious of all that occurs within the 248 organs and of everything experienced by them. So that itself shows you that within the brain, it's already there. The life as each individual life force that is designed to each organ. It's already sensed in the brain. So that's why what we said before, it is not the specific life force is not shaped after it goes into the organs. It is within the brain itself already. Continues the Alter. והנה, אין שינוי קבולת הכוחות והחיות שבאיברי הגוף מן הנשמה מצד עצמה ומאוסה. Now, the variation in receiving the functional powers and life force by the organs of the body from the soul, each organ receiving from the soul life force and power in a different form, this, says the Alter Rebbe, does not derive from the soul's essence and being. In the soul's essence and being, the soul essence and being is beyond any divisions. It's spiritual. You cannot say that this is derived, that all the 248 different separations, parts, is in the soul itself. Mischalek leramach halokim shonim mislapshim beramach mekoymes kefitziur chelkei mekoymes every aguf. That we should say that its being and essence is divided into 248 different parts, which are enclosed in 248 locations, according to the design of the various locations of the body's organ. That is absolutely not the case. Why? Because then you're making the soul like a physical thing. You're giving, she says, because according to this, it would follow that the soul's essence and being is designed in a physical design. Udmus vesavnis kesavnis aguf chas v'shalom, and likeness and structure similar to the structure of the body, God forbid. Just as the organs of the body have various shapes and forms, so according to this outlook are the functional powers, while still within the soul, different from each other in form. But again, we cannot accept this. We cannot accept this because that's not what a soul is. A soul is godly, is spiritual. It is not defined. Rather, is the soul entirely a single spiritual entity. It is one, a single entity. Two, it is a spiritual entity. As a single entity, its oneness is plain. When we say plain, it means plain without any divisions, without any definitions. It's beyond definitions. It is plain and uncompounded as a spiritual entity. Its spirituality is in a form which is divested of any physical design. It is beyond any physical design and of any type of definition of physical space, measure, or limitations. The soul is free of all such dimensions by virtue of its intrinsic being. and essence. So therefore, and it is not valid to say concerning the soul's being and essence that it is in the brain and the brain of the head more than it is in the feet. Since its being and essence is not subject to the concept and dimension of physical space and limitations. So the question is, so if the soul is totally beyond definitions, it is so totally plain, and the body has its own complex definitions, different things, different organs, different energies. It's so complex, the body. So where exactly does it start? Where does definitions begin? The Alter Rebbe is going to explain that those definitions were in potential there. The ability of seeing. The Rebbe brings also an example that in sight itself, there's the sight that the Talmud brings as the sight of a righteous person and the sight of a wicked person. A righteous person is able, his sight, when he sees something, he's able to change things. The Talmud brings stories of when a tzaddik looks at something and his sight is able to accomplish some amazing things. Now, what if a wicked person sees? Obviously, it's a totally different sight. Now, can a wicked person turn and become a tzaddik? Yes, he can. Everybody has ability to do teshuvah and change, and even reach to the level of a tzaddik. It's not very common, but it's possible. It has been done. And the Talmud brings stories of people who were not righteous and they became righteous. So when you become righteous, so what happens to the sight of this person? The eyesight, that the eyes remain the same eyes. The soul is still the same soul. So where does this new becoming tzaddik receive the different type of eyesight now? And the answer is because in potential there is something. In the potential there is something that in the sight that can potentially turn into different types of sight. So the point being is that the soul really is beyond any definitions. And yet there is at a certain point when the soul comes into the brain, and in the brain it gives its revelation, the soul becomes revealed through different ways. And there it has the potential of sight. And then potential of sight, it has different types of sight, different ways of seeing things. The seeing of a tzaddik, the seeing of, and obviously we're not talking about just physical sight. So all of these things is in potential. Continues the Alter Rebbe. Rak, he says, Shetayag minei koichos v'chayes klolim bo b'mahus v'atzmuso lotzis el hapoyel v'agiloi me'halem. Rather, he says the 613 of functional powers and vital forces are included within the soul, within its being and essence, to become actualized and emerge from this concealment. An inclusion within the soul's essence. So previously, while still included within the soul's essence, they are only in potential, and therefore hidden within the soul, not even as a functional powers which are revealed. as such, while still included within the soul. In other words, within the soul is concealed a potential for 613 functional powers to become actualized and emerge from concealment, to become revealed. And that's what Alter Rebbe says, in order to animate the 248 organs and 365 blood vessels of the body through the functional powers of the divine soul becoming enclosed within the animating of vital soul. Which also, the vital soul also possesses the corresponding 248 and 365 powers and vital forces. So that's what Alter Rebbe continues and what brings out the point that where is the main focus, where is the main place, the main abode, where this revelation of the soul comes? It comes first in the brain. Now concerning the flow of the 613 kind of functional powers and vital forces, which are drawn from the concealment of the soul, where they are previously hidden, and from there they are now drawn to the body to animate it. Concerning this flow, the sages have said that the principal dwelling place and abode of this flow and revelation of the previously concealed powers and forces is entirely situated in the brains of the head. Velochein, hey mekablim tchila koyach v'achayis roelem lefi mizgam utchunasam shem chochma binu das v'koyach hamachshov v'kol shayach laboichin. Says therefore, it is they, the brains, which first receive the powers and life force appropriate to them according to their composition and character, namely the intellect, which is divided into three intellectual faculties called Chabad, Chochma, Bina, Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and the faculty of thought, and whatever pertains to the brain. All these receive the life force from the soul before the other parts of the body. So that's number one. So number one, the soul comes to the body, and first it comes into the brain with everything that is directly connected with the brain. The understanding, the intellect, the thoughts, that is first that comes from the soul. Not only that, says Alter Rebbe, but also the life force that goes to the rest of the body also comes through the brain. And not only this, that the brain receives their own life force before the other organs, but also the overall flow of all the individual streams of vitality to the other organs is also this is also first included and enclosed in the brain of the head before it becomes revealed in the individual organs. So everything, every power that the body has, it is revealed in the brain. And it is there in the brain that the core and source of the said flow exists in a form in which the light and vitality of the entire soul are revealed. And from there, from the brain, radiance flows to all other organs. Each of which then receives the functional power and vital force appropriate to it, according to its composition and character. The power of sight is revealed in the eye, and the power of hearing in the ear, and so on. But all the functional powers flow from the brain, as is known, because there in the brain is located the principal dwelling place of the entire soul in a revealed form. Since there in the brain, the overall life force, which flows from the soul, is revealed. It is only the individual faculties of the overall life force which shines forth and radiate from there, from the brain, to all the organs of the body. Just as light radiates and shines from the sun into the innermost of rooms. What does it mean? When you have the sunshine, so the sun is very bright, but then goes into a room and shines into the room. And then if you have an inner room, there is more light that goes in. Obviously, it's not in the same level as there is the light in the outside. So just like the sun shines everywhere, there's also all of the organs, the vital energy that comes to each organ and receives, it comes from the soul, from the brain. Va'afilu alev, and even the heart, which is a central organ, from which all other organs receive vitality, because the heart diffuses to all organs. So even the heart, it receives its own vital force from the brain. And therefore the Alter Rebbe concludes in today's lesson, therefore, this is why the brain naturally dominates the heart. Kanis Kalayel is explained above. What does it mean? You know, we all know there is the battle between the heart and the brain. Who do we listen to? Many times we listen to the heart. The heart says, the brain says, go daven. The heart says, stay, sleep. Do other fun things. Who wins? The heart wins sometimes. And the Alter Rebbe teaches us that really, who has the power of winning is really the brain. Because everything comes from the brain. The vitality that goes to the heart, to the desires, everything comes from the brain. So if the person, this is the difference that a person, God gave the difference of a human being and an animal, is that a human being has the ability to control the heart. So this is the end of today's shir. As Hashem will continue, we shall continue tomorrow morning. And tomorrow is going to bring the lesson, what we see what we just explained in the human condition, how we see it also with the energy that comes from Hashem, how Hashem animates the world. So all the best, and we'll see you tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.